That was a very kind introduction. So as he said, in 2005, I founded a company called Platial. And at the time, we were trying to define place and what it meant, and place being different from a lat long. And so we had these complicated database systems for attaching descriptions of place onto a lat long, and we really cared a lot about time and history and memories and what happened at those places. And now, fast forward, 6 years later, and the notion of place has dramatically changed again. And I think the main reasons being the super adoption of smartphones, its ability to collect GPS traces, and all of this real-time information. And so I'll just walk through a little bit of that today. So I like to think about this idea of the participatory city. We are entering an era where everything is able to tweet and think, and cities are collecting information on water levels via sensors, on air quality via sensors, and we as citizens are all participating in that, walking around with smartphones. And then there's this idea of flowing places. Places move, places change, the information we have on a place changes. The idea of point of interest as a static thing is going away, and we're moving towards something that is route-based, path-based, or even journey-based. And then, of course, there's places as patterns. And, I go back to I spent a lot of time looking at GPS traces and trying to find patterns in them. And I think that we're going to learn so much more about how we migrate through our day and through our lives by being able to pay attention to our own paths and that of the city, and on the broader level, how we move through the world. So what we know is that there are already, in big infrastructure, there have been sensors for a while, right? On the bridges. The primary source of traffic information we get today is based on sensors from the road. They're actually built into the highways. And these are all very, very expensive pieces of infrastructure that don't scale. And it's great if, 30, 40, 50 years ago, you had the money to invest in this kind of infrastructure. But what if you're a city in China? What if you're a city in Latin America? What if you want to change things in the US, in your city? You just don't have that kind of capital anymore to do that. And so we're entering an era where objects tweet, right? In San Francisco, you're tweeting out that there's that there's an alarm, and it's just an alarm, don't worry, and that the Bay Bridge is opening or closing. And so we have all of this great information in real time just from sensors about our environment. And right now, there's too much even to know what to do with it, but the smart people now are figuring out when you want to get that information, when is it relevant for you to, and in what context. This is something cool from Berkeley, and it's an application that is looking at, they have built an entire lab that has a hyper-awareness of really minor differences in your accelerometer, and it's essentially trying to predict earthquakes. So you've got your iPhone in your car, and based on the shake or how it's moving or the pattern of its movement, we'll be able to understand if there's an earthquake, how far it is from us, how much time do I have to get out of the area. And then, of course, going back to GPS traces, it's really fascinating for me to think about, okay, what is the GPS trace of somebody that's parallel parking, right? Parking remains a big issue. If we could solve real-time parking, we're trying to, we'll be able to figure out how to reduce CO2 emissions. It'll be, save lots and lots of time. But also from GPS traces, being able to drive, what is the difference between a stoplight and a stop sign? There's a lot more information that we're going to be able to gather once we have huge abundance of these traces. And in my view, it looks something like this. You've got the citizen in the center, where crowdsourced information has never been so easy to collect and so important for cities to have access to. Now, we as citizens should get to decide when and how we share that information. But you've got car and transit as well. So almost all cars now have their connected car strategy that they're working on. And that is cars with Wi-Fi, it's cars with GPS, it's cars where me as an application, I'll be able to tap into the car and know when it's running out of gas. I'll be able to tap into the windshield wipers and know if it's raining. So I'll be able to tap into the cameras and understand what lane I'm in. And so, for example, in studying traffic patterns, one thing that's always a hardship is trying to figure out who is in a carpool lane, why are they going 65 and these people are going 30? Well, it's a carpool lane. So if you have access to the camera, you can solve that problem. And then you've got the random developers like us who are trying to get information. And then you've got, of course, all the cities trying to figure out what they do with their APIs. And so imagine this scenario. Imagine the emergency response scenario where we've got our shaking app and we understand as citizens that there's an earthquake, for example. What if all the routing apps had to accept from a city emergency response blockades, virtual blockades into the application that did not allow you to route through an emergency situation? We're not that far off from having this good of information. The issues are not technical or even about the amount of information, but more about issues of privacy and being able to share and how that conversation is going to happen. So when I say participatory city, I think about a future where we have access to all of this information, and it's up to us to decide, together with the cities, together with the auto manufacturers, together with the people that are collecting our information, what we want to share and why it's going to benefit us, or in some cases, keep us safe. So this is pretty banal, but I think this kind of sums it up for me. It's the journey, not the destination. If we're living in an era of flowing places, where events are more important than, this event is more important than the fact that it's park to us right now. Where we're going next is a part of that path. So it's not just that we're going to a series of static places, but that flow, that path is really, I think, what's going to be incredibly interesting. And as an application developer, figuring out how to influence that route so that you can get from point A to point B faster, so that you can, yes, get the cheaper cup of coffee or the better cup of coffee or whatever it is, becomes pretty cool. I'm going to show a couple of visualizations, and there should be some sound on this too. It's not pretty, but it's, these are two of my favorite traffic visualizations. And what you have here is a kind of a topographic map, and you've got the ability to look at certain areas and figure out how many vehicles are there at any given time, and what kind of vehicles they are. So I just thought that was pretty cool, because at the end of the day, you want to see what's happening near you or in specific places. You don't necessarily just want to see everything that's happening in a city. When you have access to all of this information, it becomes much more important to filter. So this is one visualization of a filtering mechanism. Figure you guys will appreciate this. All right, from the same company, imagine now the emergency response scenario where you can see also on certain road segments how much traffic is there, how many vehicles per day, and what are the traffic levels at that time. The other thing I guess I'm trying to get to is that places have motion now. If we're talking about the path and we're talking about the time, we need to look at motion. And taking one route now is going to be incredibly different than taking that route 10 minutes from now. I also imagine this is what that virtual roadblock would look like in your application. So this is what I do. I make an application called Waze, and the company is based in Israel and in Palo Alto. And essentially, it's free voice-guided turn-by-turn navigation in real-time traffic. We have 7 million people who are using the application to get where they want to go, and we're collecting the GPS traces and timestamps. What that means is that we're not just collecting information from those sensors on the major roads, but that we're collecting information wherever people are driving. So that's the surface streets, which we haven't had access to before. And not only are we just collecting the traces, but it's a network of drivers. It's a community. So you've really never experienced something as optimistic as this, I think, in your GPS. But those little creatures you see are people using the application right now. So you have a sense that you know where the information is coming from. You can choose to be anonymous, or you can share it with your Facebook friends and see their little F icons. You can belong to a group. But the point is you can see where people are and thereby understand why the traffic is the way it is. We also show you in real time what's affecting how your ETA, how long it's going to take. So here you'll see that there are 3 notices of traffic, and that one is pretty bad and some are just orange there. And importantly, you can report. So primarily it's passive, but you can also click a button if you're stopped. We don't let you text while you're driving, of course. And you can annotate that there are police, that there's an accident, that there's a hazard. You can take a picture. You can leave voice annotation for other drivers. This is particularly handy when we launched the hazard feature. People were leaving voice annotations about ice on the roads. It was last winter, and which lanes were particularly slippery. The other thing is that related to local discovery, so with Waze, we take these GPS traces and we actually own the base map ourselves. In the US, we started with Tiger data, which is public from the US Census Bureau, and it's static and there are a ton of disconnects and it's not valuable for routing. But because we have so many drivers going over those roads, we're able to turn it into a navigable map. Then we put the traffic layer on top and then the social layer on top, and now we're focusing more on this notion of a point of interest. So the way we've done it in local search in the past is aggregate everything you can get, and it's all pretty much a glorified Starbucks finder. We don't have good enough algorithms yet to serve you up what's relevant to you in your context. So we said, okay, you know what? The users know best. You know when you want to open Foursquare, and you can see who's checked in there. You know when you want to open Yelp, so you can get a review on something that has higher quality. So from within the local search, you can just launch all of those, and also Google and Bing and those guys too. And again, in your preview map of how to get there, so we'll complete the cycle and take you all the way there and show you live what's happening on the roads, even in the preview. One of the things that I think we became known for is the fun. And when you have to collect lots and lots of dense information, you have to make it a little bit fun. But the idea is not that we're a game. The idea is how do you go from fun to function? How do you get to critical mass? And to get people engaged in this kind of gamification, if you will, it gets people using the application. They use it about 300 minutes a month right now because it's fun and they're getting some value out of it. And then you can get to enough information that it can be actually functional. So this is what you'll see now if you open the application. It's for Halloween, pumpkins and ghosts. We put these road goodies in areas where we don't have fresh information. And all it takes is one person to veer off of their route a short bit. They get points for going over that pumpkin or munching the pumpkin. And everyone else within the network in real time knows what's happening there and how fast people are going. We also have a notion of groups. It's primarily used for commute groups. So you want to filter information from Palo Alto to San Francisco. But we also have groups of people that are firefighters that have joined a group, or BMW drivers. And of course, you can check into Foursquare and get the road warrior badge when you arrive at your destination. And we were one of the first people to use the Twitter Geo Firehose. And to get more of that real-time information, we run our own algorithms over it so that we can get a fair level of confidence that we're bringing in Twitter information that's related to the road. So this bridge is open. There's traffic jam here. We're trying to only bring in that information that's relevant to you in the car from Twitter. So we look at it in 4 phases when you're crowdsourcing, right? If we didn't have a map at all, it would be the build phase. And you can actually see yourself building roads. I think in South Africa, people are still doing this, but we started the company 3 years ago, and it's pretty hard to find anywhere in the world that's still in build phase right now. It's pretty fun, but it takes work. We have people that are going onto our website and adding the street names and all of that as well. Then you get to the play phase, and that's when we're collecting the navigation and the speeds. This is a turn restriction. You're allowed to go this way. This is a one-way. This is a two-way. And then eventually you get to the value, where you've got the real-time traffic information. Just to give you an example, in Israel, where we were founded, we're already at critical mass, already generating revenue. 20% of the entire population uses Waze. That's not the driving population. There's nothing that happens that we don't know. And we're very close in many markets in the US and Paris and many of the metropolitan areas in Western Europe as well. So if people are engaged, you can collect this information very, very quickly. The problem we had in the past when I was doing Platial is it was all manual. We had to enter all that information. And now we have to enter very, very little, and we just rely on the sensors and the community. So the idea is that it's a community of drivers, and underlying everything that we're trying to do that's incredibly utility-based is this platform for play. And we direct it anywhere we need to, depending on our phase of growth. So if you were the first person to go down a road when we were still in the map building phase, your icon would turn into a little Pac-Man guy, and you would be chomping those dots and get points for that. and then the road is validated, essentially. We had about 3 to 5% of our audience doing that, and we wanted to step it up. The road goodies took us to about 8 to 12% of our driver base. And then when we started overlaying promotions and contests, this was, I forget what we were giving away, probably a phone or something, and it was around the World Cup. We had 20% of our driver base participating. And now we added personal achievements a while ago so that when you drive your first 5 miles, you get this piece of candy. When you do your first report, you also have a personal achievement. So now 100% of our driver base can participate in this gaming, and whether they want to focus on the utility or the fun, they have just a positive sense of the experience. So what that means is something like this. So in LA, it was our #1 metro in the US, and I was there on June 1st, driving from the airport at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, deep in rush hour, going to the Lux Hotel on Sunset. Waze gave me this route. It basically told me to get off the highway. I was on the 405. And this is what I saw out my window, bumper to bumper. So it's always a little bit scary when an application that's crowdsourced tells you to get off of your comfortable route, but I work there, so I listened. And when I got off the exit, this is what I saw on Sepulveda, 0 traffic. That's out the window. I got there in 26 minutes, and Google told us 108 minutes at that same time. So this is the value of the crowd. Somebody driving along Sepulveda before you get there and knowing that it was going to save you time. Okay, so then there's this other volume, please. I don't know if you've heard of Carmageddon. This was a 10-mile stretch of the 405 in LA that was shut down. There were dozens of alternate routes people could take. And there's no way you could get real-time information if you didn't rely on the crowd. So we put together this little video about strength in numbers and banding together. Pretty playful, like us. But what happened is ABC approached us, and they realized it was the only way. Keep the sound, it's fine.
How the app can make moving around Carmageddon easier.
Join ADC7's
And they asked us to be embedded in their news
publicity is
studio
putting Waze
during
itself on the
Carmageddon.
map in a city known for its terrible traffic. Dan Simon, CNN, San Francisco.
App that can find you the fastest routes around the gridlock. It's called Waze.
They gave us
and
a
all weekend
ton
long, we'll
of
be getting
promotion. They
real-time
really
updates
wanted
on the
people
delays
using
and
the
alternate routes
application
from
so
the
that they can see in
creative
real
team
time
behind
what
it.
routes were going to
Waze
be
combines
available.
GPS navigation technology with social networking to get you where you want to go faster than ever.
The 405 closing down. It's what's bugging you. We have ways to help. Just download the Waze app at abc7.com/traffic, and you'll have what you need to get around the traffic. Download now to beat Carmageddon from ABC7 Eyewitness News.
One of the best ways to beat Carmageddon is by downloading the free Waze app. It gives you the conditions drivers on the road are experiencing right now. And let's head over to our Waze desk and Diane Eisnor with what Wazers are reporting.
We even
Hi,
had a
Diane.
Waze traffic desk during that time.
Just a few minutes ago, I said that there was a report from a Wazer about an accident, and working here from the ABC7 studios, we have confirmed, the police have confirmed, that user Somar02 was absolutely right. Unfortunately, it was a fatality, so a very bad accident on the I-15 toward Barstow. Thank you so much, Somar02. This is the kind of reporting that we really need out there from citizens.
We're actually going to send it over to our Waze.
So citizen
desk.
traffic is
How's it
something
looking,
that
Diane
really
Eisner? Are the
people have been
Wazers
trying to tap into
participating,
for a
letting
very
us know
long
where all the
time, right?
problems are?
Call in and
They
tell us
are.
what the
It's
traffic is
incredible.
like.
The 405 is
But
still
now the
closed.
traffic reporter
At least
has
we can see
access
tons
to
of
an
Wazers on
iPad.
the road. Why don't we just do a little check-in here? User Rotko from the group Chino Heroes to Los Angeles Hollywood has reported an accident.
Great reminder. Keep using your Waze. Just flip it on, and you have all of us who have to commute out there in Southern California. Now I want to check in with our Wazers because I am a Wazer myself, and I want to say good morning to Jay Ray. He's actually a member that contributes a lot, so he's earning points out there just by flipping on his Waze and letting us know what's out there, including the stalled out car. It's on the shoulder, but it's just a little warning to, watch out if you're about to hit the 60 freeway in Pomona. So thank you for that, Jay Ray.
Okay, so it was pretty fascinating what happened there. In LA, they're still using us every single day. Every morning during morning commute, they're doing citizen traffic reporting. Why? it engages their audience. It's good enough information that it's really competing with the typical way that they give traffic. They have more information now, and they're engaging with their audience in a better way. And we've started to roll this out throughout the country. The other thing is that the traffic reporters just like to play with the iPad. So it's an incredibly simple application where you've got an iPad, it's projecting onto the green screen, and even the mayor was tweeting by the end of this program that they need to be using Waze because there's no other way to get around Carmageddon. This is Dallas.
To go before 6 o'clock. So because we're looking so great throughout the Metroplex, no reports of any accidents, and so far, no unusual delays, we do want to check in with our new traffic app that is free, that is real-time traffic generated by all of our users who are already out on the road. So let's start by taking a look at what's going on throughout the Metroplex. And really what I'm seeing so far as we take a look at the Metroplex on the whole are really just those normal delays continuing to build. No reports of any accidents, as I say, as of yet. So let's check in with some of our drivers already on the road. And moving in between Dallas and Tarrant County, we have a new user, and I can tell that because that new user has a pacifier in the mouth. And this is Brown TR1 moving along eastbound I-20 from Tarrant toward Dallas County about 40 miles per hour. So again, just more signs that we are facing some of those normal delays. It's also a similar story.
You get the idea. It's fun to function. How do you use that playfulness to engage people enough that you can get huge quantities of information to the point that you can change the way people are reporting on their news? And so that's what we've been working on. Now, if we take a quick look at this notion of places as patterns, one of the more interesting things, even potentially bigger than just smartphones, is being embedded in these connected vehicles. Now, it's not going to be huge for another couple of years, right? Because they're all mostly still in prototype phase right now. But the patterns that you're going to be able to see in terms of what, in this kind of weather, people do this. Here, the speed changes at this moment compared with this moment. There's a pothole here because of what happens with the accelerometer. There's so many sensors in the car that we don't have access to on the smartphone, right? We pay $50,000 for something versus $500, it's a big difference. I'll just spend a second, I guess, talking about how we make money in this and the idea of influencing these patterns. So here I am, here's where I'm going, usually my commute. And along there, we used to talk about location-targeted advertising, and now we call it location-guided advertising because we know where you're going. With our users, we know how far and what percentage are willing to veer off of their route for something that they perceive as valuable. So I'll share a case study. I'll just skip along here. Something that we did with Nintendo several months ago, and it was when they launched the 3DS. During that time, we picked 60 Best Buy and Toys R Us stores that were having launch events. And we decided to give them a little message saying, okay, you're close. If you click on Mario, you have a chance to win a 3DS. So when you clicked on the little Mario guy, it would pan over the closest Best Buy or Toys R Us, and you had the ability to navigate there. And along your route, we would mirror the Mario game. So you would be collecting the mushrooms and the power-up stars and all of that. And the final road goodie was at the point at the retailer. So we knew exactly how many people got there. And of all the people who saw the Mario offer, 6.34% of folks actually drove to retail. Astonishing. I mean, if you think about the number of people who click on a banner or even any kind of mobile ad, this is potentially huge. We launched the platform in Israel, where it's more of a self-serve model, and we're not tracking all the way to retail. We're just collecting information on the people who click navigate. And we're seeing consistently at 10% what we call click to drive. Another bit on patterns. You can't do the 2 sound inputs at once, huh? That's cool. I'll try to talk loudly. What you're seeing here is just Waze information in Los Angeles for the morning commute. And you're seeing those circles are the manual reports. The bubbles are traffic jams, and then the white lines are GPS traces only from Waze drivers. So in the course of 24 hours, every single day, Oh, so every single, right, thanks. So every single day, our drivers are basically driving the entire city. This is Rome. Just morning commute. So you can see that the traffic jams are building up in the periphery of the city. And people are really driving all over. Then this is Paris. Again, morning commute from 6 a.m. till about 10. So in a couple of hours, you see the entire grid of a city in live and in real time what's happening on the roads. This is Tel Aviv. Keep in mind, we have a ton of drivers. Nothing happens in that city that we don't know about. That's what I call the cartography of live mapping. In addition to places not being static, maps are also no longer static. They're flowing, living pieces of information that we can filter according to what we want to know about place. So what we're seeing is massive sensing and sharing. We're seeing that there's no such thing as a discrete point of interest, but more patterns and flows of information, that we are navigating more on time than on space. You see the motion and the importance of time in this. That we're going from this idea of urban mobility to one of migration patterns. And it's pretty exciting to me. I think the most important thing is that if places in their discrete forms don't exist, then nobody really owns them anymore. It's really something that goes to us as a collective. And our patterns are what are uniquely ours. We can't buy them, they're ours. So I think that we're headed toward a world where this whole notion of place is much less about ownership over a geographic domain and much, much more about how we choose to move through the world. And that's pretty much it. Do we do Q&A or do we, yeah, okay. I don't think I'm in charge of deciding who gets the mic, yeah.
Hey, Diane.
Hi.
My question is, what happens if there are misfits who want to mislead people and drive down a highway or road because they want them all to themselves and tell people that, oh, there's an accident here, don't go there? Is there any way to verify a source of information? Are there redundancies in place to make sure that someone reports something that is actually true?
There are, to an extent, right? It's still crowdsourced and we want it to be so. But for example, in the previous iterations of these kind of crowdsourced maps, you didn't have to be in the location. Now that we know where you are, we know that the people who are reporting are actually there. So that's one step. The second step is that all of this points and rank and participation in the community builds up a score. What that score does is it gives you more weight within the community. The other thing we do to give you more weight within the community is you can thumbs up every report. So it would take quite a lot of effort to overturn somebody with a high rank, and it would be very easy for somebody with high rank to overturn somebody with low rank. So we really do have an architecture in place where the more you participate, the more weight you carry within the community. And we haven't had too many problems.
So mapping now is very interesting, but what about a point in the future, like I'm planning a trip somewhere and I want to get some information about events that might be occurring next Saturday in LA, for example. Or on a shorter time scale, complex systems can exhibit shock waves if the delays in propagation of information have certain properties. So for example, I could get a wave of reports from a freeway that causes suboptimal behavior as opposed to optimal behavior.
So, in terms of, I'll take the distant future one first. We have also historic information. And that historic information is basically just a storing of all the real-time data so that we have a sense of what is the average speed on this road segment for this exact time of day, which is really handy more for things like commuting. So we can give you an estimate of things in the future based on the time of day that you're looking at it. We will also update you. If things change along your route, we'll ask you if you're interested in rerouting, and we'll tell you why. If your ETA changes along the route, we'll also tell you that, whether it's good or bad. So we have the idea in our minds that things are going to change along the way, and we just have to let you know what changes. You can't predict. We predict to a certain extent based on averages, but we want to let you know in real time what's happening. In terms of the complex systems, it's the kind of thing for us where there's the shock waves. We haven't seen too much of this, right? I think the biggest series of shock waves were around Carmageddon. And people were worried that if we told you to take an alternate route, then all the traffic would take that alternate route, and then it would build up traffic. But it's a real-time system. So when there was traffic there, we gave you a different alternate route. So I think that we're also in baby stages, right? When all this fancy talk about patterns, that's also a little bit more in the future. Right now, we know a bit, but I think it's really a look into the future of what we're going to be able to do with that information and do with those shockwaves and understand them. Right now, we're just not there.
I'm a happy Waze user. I really enjoy the app. Great job. But I have a, sorry, perhaps too pragmatic a question. I have tried, so I use the iPhone version of the app. It's mounted on my dashboard in a fixed position. And I've tried 4 different times to try to report something, but it requires so much attention and so much interaction to report anything, I can't accomplish it. I'm assuming there must be some sort of magical thing that people are able to do to report things in real time in this way from actually holding the device and accomplishing it. Could you actually just quickly explain to us how they do that from behind the wheel?
So I'll say it in 3 phases. One is that we used to not capture the exact time and location when you clicked report. Now we do, so you can go back later and enter information about it. So that's one, is just click it and then later on you can enter the information. The second thing is that we do recommend you do it when you're stopped. So if you're in a bad accident or something is really terrible, you're actually stopped and so you have the time to do it. And then I guess the third thing I want to say is that distracted driving is one of our primary concerns and threats to our company. And so we do a lot of research on what we call driver workload, which is at what speeds, for example, you should be exposed to what functionality. And we're just working with the researchers right now to try to optimize that. This is where being embedded in the cars also becomes pretty exciting because they have all of this research. When you start seeing us in the head unit, you'll use your steering wheel controls, you'll use all of your existing controls, you won't have to touch something different. And then also speech recognition. Right now we've just done a complete overhaul of our text-to-speech, but there's still not enough speech recognition, which is coming in subsequent releases. So don't do it unless you're stopped, or click report and then come back later. Carpooling also, passengers, we have a ton of people who are doing it in passenger mode. Don't do it. And also, if you try to enter text, you've probably gotten this if you're an avid Wazer, it'll say no typing while driving.
Since I'm not familiar with your service as a user, I'm just curious whether you have considerations about people reporting who are not, let's say, driving in cars, but let's say are passengers in buses or walking or biking or other such things like that.
So we've geared the entire system for drivers. It's a harder problem to solve when you're trying to collect and process real-time information at high speeds. So we actually don't have a version that's good for biking and walking. Right now, if you were to bike with it, it would mess with our speeds. But we have enough density of data right now in most places that it wouldn't have any kind of a major impact. if there were very few users at the time, we would think it was a traffic jam.
I was just curious for accidents and things like that. How do they get cleared when the accident goes away?
So a couple of ways. Each kind of report has its own time of decay. So accidents tend to go away on their own pretty rapidly. Traffic jams, depending on where they are, tend to stay longer. Police reports and speed cameras tend to stay forever. If we're not sure, when you're approaching something, it will say hazard ahead or accident ahead, and it will talk to you, and then will say thumbs up or not there. So we do ask for a little bit of input.
I've heard that there are some insurance companies, car insurance companies, that offer discounts for users who will...
The black box.
Yeah, who will let them track their every move. I would have signed up for that already myself, but it hasn't been offered to me. How are you looking at that?
Mostly just as an observer. So it's true. Certain insurance companies have a black box, which is like what's used in fleet vehicles that will track your speed. And you'll have a reduced insurance. It will keep track of making sure that you stay in the appropriate speed limits, et cetera. Right now, that's nothing related to what we're engaged in. I think it's curious. It's another sensor, which I think is interesting. I doubt they'll share the information back. I think it's, I wouldn't want us to do it. I wouldn't want us to track you for something that could potentially give you tickets or increase your insurance. Not yet. We're not there yet.
Hi, I'm not currently a user, but I sure will try it. But I had a question about, in terms of construction or potential like detours that are planned for the future. Is that something that's reported by users, or do you guys somehow gather that information from other sources?
We don't do a good job of that yet. We have a few municipalities that are using an API that's allowing them to put in construction. But right now, I think it's probably end of October, beginning of November, we'll release it so that anybody can put in their feed as well. So particularly the broadcast partners and police stations have asked to be able to have access to that interface so that they can report as well. Yeah, it's really important.
Hi, excuse me. I'm curious about your data capacity and bandwidth and stuff. Can you quote some spectacular stats on, how many of these messages you get on a daily basis and how much you need to budget for a new city and that sort of thing?
It depends on the size of the city, and if you want a technical response, that won't be me. But I will say that, for example, we only have 3 servers. They're all in the cloud. We break it up into Israel, North America, and the rest of the world right now. And I think our maximum concurrent users on any one of those systems is probably close to 50,000, 60,000. So pretty good. And because we're not broken down by metro, we haven't really done a lot of tuning and tweaking for when we enter a new market. I think we'll release something next week that says that we're getting about a report a second.
Hopefully a quick question. Do you have any plans to expand this for people who are commuters waiting for a third person to get in the carpool lane? So for example, you'll see people queued up waiting for a ride, share a ride with somebody.
Yeah, in DC, this is particularly big. Well, for example, I think it's growing in a number of cities, and it tends to happen organically. We are implementing carpooling features, but we haven't done something specifically for that yet. But it's one of those things, as a traffic person, I'm really excited about seeing how that happens, because literally they're waiting on the side of the road like construction workers, right, to try to get in. And in the cities where it functions well, everybody's safe, everybody feels good about it. I think it's great.
And also a big issue there is trust, for example, because I might say don't want to ride with anybody named Dexter.
So yeah, we've got the carpool thing going on. I think another exciting thing looking to the future is you'll notice that there's such a thing in the traffic world called congestion pricing. And so at certain times of the day, you'll be charged more money to take a bridge or a particular road. I like the idea of congestion incentives. So if we know how dense the 405 is, then we can make estimates if we're working with the city about the number of cars we would need to get off the road to clear that congestion. Because most of you probably know that Americans alone spend 4.2 billion hours stuck in traffic, and that equals about 3 billion gallons of wasted fuel every year. If we can make an actual dent in that, it's pretty exciting. And so if you can give somebody a coupon or an offer or something, or even just for the pride in their community or knowing the impact it will have, getting them to take a different route because of that, I think is pretty cool. So congestion incentives is something I'm looking at.
I'm wondering, what's your usage for taxi drivers?
I have no idea. I know I've been seeing some ads from taxi drivers saying that they'll give Wazers discounts and things like that. I know that there are also some services that have been focusing on getting taxi drivers to use them. What we found is that it kind of messes with the driving patterns. And so there's a lot of stopping and starting, creating false traffic there. So we haven't made it a focus. But my driver is an avid Waze user. We Wazed over here tonight.
You kind of already answered this, but I was just wondering what your dream result is of this. So in 5 years, and everyone's using Waze, what do you see happening?
I love this, but so I think that we can actually make a dent in the amount of money people spend. I think that, what I didn't mention was that same 3 billion gallons of wasted fuel from traffic equates to 25 million tons of carbon dioxide put into the air. So, I mean, these are quite high numbers. And if we have 50 million drivers, the amount of pollution that won't go into the air is potentially huge. Never mind the time savings and the decrease in stress. I mean, traffic, it doesn't sound very sexy, but it's a terrible and universal problem. And if we can make a dent in eliminating it and help create less, reduce friction and people moving around and having a more fruitful life, that's pretty rad.
So I want to get back to the accident thing because it does sound like your app is very attention intensive. Have you talked to municipalities about tracking accidents from actual Waze users? Do they get penalized? You do a lot of incentivizing. Do users get penalized if, let's say, they cause an accident or they're involved in an accident, anything like that?
I've never heard of a Wazer involved in an accident. I like to think that people have a good amount of common sense. And the fact that we put some barriers in place from people interacting too much with it while you're driving, I think helps. I talked to the mayor of LA when we were doing the Carmageddon program, and that was one of the things that his people was concerned about. And then when we showed him what we had in place, he was less concerned and he felt better about promoting the use of the app. But even with the broadcasters, each time we do a segment, then we're saying also, don't do this while you're driving, don't do this. So we're trying to nail that at the same time. I guess I'll share a story about the positive side of this related to police and municipalities, which is, it was somewhere in the UK, and the police actually use Waze. They have a department of motorways, so it was somebody that worked there. He's a Waze user, and he got a report of an accident, and so he went there, and he was on the scene of the accident, and it was like a rollover head injury, and he believes, and it came in 10 minutes before it went into the control room. He believes that he saved somebody's life because he heard about the accident on Waze prior to it coming into the control room.
Just curious if you have observed any interesting emergent behavior with your community that maybe you didn't intend or plan for, but was interesting or told you something about the community of Waze drivers, like DIY bumper stickers or people meeting up or anything.
A ton, actually. And I wouldn't say that they're common enough to call it an emergent behavior, but there's definitely stuff I'm surprised at. I mean, first of all, I'm surprised that people collect cupcakes and pumpkins. I had a certain level of skepticism around that. Then to hear that they were tweeting that they were going on dates collecting these pumpkins and things, that it became a kind of recreation, that the kids had the iPhone in the back of the car while the parents were driving, and they were keeping score. So that it was a whole family car thing was a surprise. I think that's probably the biggest one, is just feeling like there's a community inside the car. Also, how people are grouping up in these groups, these driving groups, is a surprise. Again, probably 70% of people are joining groups as commuter groups, but really there's a group called Sexy Drivers. There was a caravan to Burning Man of thousands of people that were caravanning there and sharing information and organizing stops together. So that kind of stuff is pretty cool, and I never would have imagined.
How much more time? So Waze is really, really cool. But one thing I'm curious
Brian
about.
founded Eventful around the same time that I founded Platial, and so it's really great to see you. But okay.
One thing I'm curious about, clearly, there's a lot of the design and everything is trying to incentivize, reduction of traffic and reduction of carbon emissions and all kinds of good stuff. But it seems like one also thing that you'd want to encourage may actually conflict with other goals, and that is, wouldn't it be a great outcome if this app encouraged not driving and actually taking public transportation instead? And to what degree are you guys doing that now, and to what degree is that a component of your future plans?
So the public transportation thing is really interesting. I would like to see us integrate real-time data from public transport later, particularly on multimodal. But when I went in and started studying the number of people who are taking public transport, mostly because the number of people who have access to public transport, it was depressing. The issue is that people are going to drive because public transportation is not good enough, and we have to fix driving. So that's what we're focused on. There are very few examples of systems where public transportation works for everyone, not the elite few who work downtown, right, but everyone. People don't even have access to supermarkets, right, and these food deserts, never mind, have access to public transportation. So they're going to drive. There's an example in Brazil. There's a city that the transportation plan and the urban plan were created together. That almost never happens, and it was done in the 70s, and it's called Curitiba or something like that. You know this. So what they did was they created the grid of the city in these concentric circles with roads going out, and then they created beautiful rapid bus transportation systems that hit everywhere. And they've managed to scale from like 20,000 to 200,000 people, and that plan still works. 80% of their citizens take public transportation. So it's a much bigger issue than Waze. Thanks.